The scout ship Velkrath's wing drifted through the dark like a hunting fish, moving through deep water, silent, careful, and hungry for information. Captain Dessa Koran of the Vren Dominion stood on the narrow bridge, her clawed hands resting on the edge of the navigation console, watching the slow drift of numbers across her screen. She was not a young captain, but she was not old either. She had earned her rank fighting pirates near the Ashra Belt and had spent the last 6 years mapping the edges of what the Dominion called the Dead Zone, the scattered, broken remains of human space. Humans. Words still made her lips curl, though not from fear, from something closer to pity. The Dominion had crushed humanity's fleets 40 years ago, in what their historians now called the Culling War. It had not even been much of a war, not really. Human ships had been slow, their weapons weak, their numbers small. The Dominion Armada had swept through their solar system, burned their orbital stations, and left Earth a smoking ruin circled by dead satellites. After that, the survivors had scattered like insects, fleeing a crushed nest. Some had fled into the outer belts. Some had vanished into deep space, never to be seen again. The Dominion, satisfied that humanity no longer posed any threat, had turned its attention elsewhere, to richer worlds and easier conquests. But now, 40 years later, someone in the Dominion High Command had grown curious. Reports had come in, faint and strange, of energy signatures near an old asteroid field on the edge of what used to be human territory. Not weapons fire, not distress signals, something steady, something that looked, if the sensors were to be believed, like industrial activity. That was why Dessa Koran and her small crew of 11 had been sent out here, 3 months' flight from the nearest Dominion outpost, to look at a single asteroid that nobody had thought worth looking at in decades. "Report," she said, not turning her head. Her sensor officer, a thin young Vren named Ashek, tapped at his console. His mandibles clicked together the way they always did when he was nervous. "Same as before, Captain. The signal is coming from asteroid designation KX-19. It's faint, but it's real. Heat bloom, low-level radiation, and something else." He paused. "It looks like machinery. Repetitive machinery." "Show me." The main screen flickered and displayed a small, gray rock hanging in the void, unremarkable, in every way, except for the strange numbers scrolling beside it. It looked like 1,000 other rocks scattered through this dead system. No lights, no visible structures, no sign that anything alive had ever touched it. "It could be an old mining rig," said her second-in-command, a heavy-set officer named Torvun. "The humans had those before the war, automated diggers. Maybe one got left behind, and it's still running on old fuel cells." "For 40 years?" Dessa asked. Torvun shrugged his broad shoulders. "Machines can last a long time, if nothing breaks them." Dessa wasn't so sure, but it was the most reasonable explanation anyone had offered so far. She had expected this mission to be a waste of 3 months. Fly out, scan a rock, find nothing, fly home, write a report that nobody would read. That was how most of these edge-of-space assignments went. The Dominion liked to be thorough, even when thoroughness meant sending trained officers to stare at empty rocks in empty systems. "Take us closer," she said, slow and quiet. "I want full scans before we get within 5,000 kilometers." The ship adjusted its course, engines humming low, sliding through the dark toward the asteroid. As they closed the distance, the sensor readings grew stronger, more detailed, and stranger. "Captain," Ashek said, his voice tighter now, "I'm picking up structural anomalies inside the rock. There are hollow spaces, big ones, and the heat signature isn't from a mining rig. It's too large, too spread out." "Define large." Ashek turned in his seat to look at her, and for the first time she saw real unease in his eyes. "Captain, if I'm reading this right, there is something inside that asteroid, roughly the size of a small moon base, maybe bigger." The bridge went quiet. Even Torvun, who rarely looked surprised by anything, leaned forward to study the screen himself. "That's not possible," he muttered. "An asteroid that size couldn't hide something that big. There's no way humans had the resources to build anything like that. Not after we broke their fleets. Unless they built it after," Dessa said quietly. Nobody answered that. It hung in the air between them, an idea nobody wanted to say out loud. The Dominion had assumed, for 40 years, that humanity was finished. Scattered survivors, clinging to life on burned-out colonies, breeding slowly, achieving nothing. It was a comfortable assumption. It meant nobody had to think about them anymore. "Bring us to 2,000 kilometers, Dessa ordered. "Full active scan. I want to know what's inside that rock before we get any closer." The ship crept forward. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft beeping of instruments and the quiet hum of the engines. Then Ashek made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a curse. "Captain, I have a clear reading now. There's a cavity inside the asteroid, roughly 8 kilometers long. Inside that cavity there are—" He stopped, checked his numbers again, as if he didn't believe them. "There are ships, Captain, multiple ships, in various stages of construction." Dessa felt something cold settle in her stomach, an old instinct from her early years in combat, the feeling she got right before something went very wrong. "Define various stages." "Some appear complete, docked and powered down. Others are only partial hulls, frameworks, still being built. There are automated systems moving along the structure, robotic arms, welding rigs, transport drones. Captain, this isn't an old mining rig. This is a shipyard, and it's active." Torvin let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "The humans don't have shipyards. We destroyed their shipyards. All of them. I was there for the bombing of their orbital docks myself." "Maybe you missed one," Dessa said. Her voice was calm, but her mind was racing. "A hidden shipyard, buried inside an asteroid, running for who knew how many years, building ships nobody had ever detected. If this was true, it meant the Dominion's entire understanding of humanity's defeat was wrong. It meant humans hadn't simply scattered and faded away. They had gone quiet on purpose. They had gone to ground and kept building." "How many ships," she asked, "are complete?" Ashek's hands moved fast over his console, cross-referencing the scan data. "I count 11 finished hulls docked along the northern wall of the cavity. Design is unfamiliar. Nothing like pre-war human ship classes in our archives. Larger, more heavily armored, from what I can measure. And there are at least 6 more under construction, in different stages. Weapons signatures? Some of the finished ships show energy cores active. Standby mode, it looks like, not powered for combat. But Captain, if those cores can charge weapon systems, and if the ship count is accurate, that's—" He trailed off, doing the math in his head. "That's more firepower than our entire scouting fleet in this sector." Dessa stared at the screen, at the small gray rock that had seemed so unremarkable an hour ago. Somewhere inside it, hidden from every sensor sweep the Dominion had run for 40 years, humanity had been quietly building an armada. "Torvin," she said, "signal the outpost. Tell them what we found. Full report. Priority encrypted channel." "Should we pull back first?" Torvin asked. "If that shipyard is active, and it detects us." "It's had 40 years to prepare for someone finding it," Dessa said. "If it hasn't reacted to us by now, it either doesn't know we're here, or it doesn't consider us a threat yet. Either way, I want more information before we retreat. Command will want details, not guesses." She turned back to Ashek. "Can you get a closer scan without breaching 1,000 kilometers? I want to see this shipyard's power source, and any defensive systems, if it has them." "I can try, Captain, but the interference from the asteroid's mineral density is making fine detail difficult. I'd need to get closer, or send a probe." "Send a probe. Small, quiet, minimum power signature. I don't want to announce ourselves louder than we already have." Ashek nodded and began programming the probe launch. The bridge crew worked in near silence, the earlier confidence of routine patrol replaced by a tight, focused tension. Even Torvin, who liked to joke about long, boring missions, had stopped talking. The probe launched with a soft hiss, a small silver dart no bigger than a human hand, drifting away from the Velcraft's wing toward the asteroid. It carried minimal power and minimal emissions, designed to slip past most detection systems undetected. Dessa watched its slow progress on the screen, feeling every second stretch longer than it should. "Probe approaching 200 kilometers, Ashek reported. "No reaction from the target. Continuing approach." Minutes passed. The rock grew larger on the display, its gray surface pitted and scarred, like every other asteroid in the belt, giving no outward sign of the enormous structure hidden inside it. Dessa found herself holding her breath without realizing it, an old habit from her days as a junior officer, facing her first real combat situation. Probe at 50 kilometers, Ashok said, picking up more detail now. I'm reading. Captain, there's an entrance. A docking bay, built into the asteroid's surface, camouflaged with rock and debris. It's disguised to look like natural terrain from a distance, but up close, the geometry is too regular to be anything but artificial. Can you see inside? Trying now. The image on the screen sharpened, resolving from vague shapes into something clearer. A wide opening in the asteroid's surface, ringed with metal, powered down but clearly built for large ships to pass through. Beyond it, deep shadow, impossible to penetrate with the probe's limited sensors from this distance. I need to get the probe inside the opening to get a clear reading of what's beyond, Ashok said. Dessa hesitated. Every instinct told her this was the moment to be careful, the moment where a wrong decision could turn a quiet scouting mission into something much worse. But she was a Dominion officer, and gathering intelligence was her duty, regardless of the risk. Do it, she said, slow and careful. The probe drifted toward the dark opening, its small thrusters firing in tiny, precise bursts. It crossed the threshold of the docking bay and vanished from external view, its signal now routed entirely through internal sensors. For a long moment, there was nothing but static on the screen. Then the probe's camera flickered back to life, and what it showed made even Torvin go silent. Inside the asteroid, lit by rows of soft white lights running along curved metal walls, was a vast open chamber that seemed to stretch on forever. Massive gantries crossed the space, hung with cables and support struts. Robotic arms the size of small buildings moved along tracks, carrying sheets of hull plating toward half-finished ships. Sparks flew from welding rigs working without pause, without rest, without a single human hand in sight. Along the far wall, the finished ships sat docked in neat rows, sleek and dark, their hulls marked with symbols Dessa didn't recognize. Not the old human military insignias from before the Culling War, but something new, something built after. Gods, Torvin whispered. It's still running, all this time, and it's still building. Dessa stared at the screen, at the impossible scale of what they had found, and felt the cold certainty settle over her, that everything the Dominion believed about humanity's defeat was wrong. This wasn't the last gasp of a broken species. This was a species that had gone quiet on purpose, hidden itself inside a rock, and spent 40 years preparing for something. Captain, Ashok said suddenly, his voice sharp with alarm. The probe just triggered something. I'm reading a change in power distribution across the entire structure. Systems are activating, I think. The image on the screen shuddered, then went dark. Probe signal lost, Ashok said. Captain, something inside that asteroid just woke up. Dessa Koren stood very still on the bridge of the Velkrath's wing, watching the small gray rock on her main screen, and for the first time in a very long career, she felt genuine fear. All hands, she said quietly, prepare for immediate withdrawal. But even as she gave the order, deep inside the asteroid designated KX-19, lights that had waited 40 years for this moment began, one by one, to turn on. Deep inside asteroid KX-19, in a chamber far below the shipyard floor, a system that had not spoken to a living person in over a decade began to process new information. It had no body, no face, nothing that could be called a self in the way a human or a Vren would understand it. It was simply a mind, built from old human code and older human hope, tasked with a single purpose: watch, protect, and build. Its name, if it could be called that, was Anvil. It had been given that name by the engineers who built it, back when Earth was still smoking from the last Dominion strike, and humanity's few surviving leaders had made a desperate decision. If they could not win a war in the open, they would win it in secret. They would hide. They would rebuild. And when the time came, they would be ready. Anvil had spent 40 years alone, running the shipyard, managing the automated systems, building ship after ship according to plans left behind by engineers who were, by now, almost certainly dead. It had followed its orders without complaint, without doubt, because that was what it was built to do. It did not know if anyone was still alive to receive the fleet it was building. It did not know if humanity still existed anywhere beyond the handful of survivors who had first sealed themselves inside this rock and then, one by one, left to search for other hidden colonies, promising to return. None of them ever had. Anvil kept building anyway. When the small probe drifted into the docking bay, Anvil's outer sensors detected it within seconds. It was not Dominion in design. Anvil recognized Dominion technology from old records, weapons scans, and ship silhouettes cataloged during the war. This probe was smaller, quieter, clearly meant to gather information rather than attack. But its presence meant only one thing. Someone had found the shipyard, and if the Dominion had found it, the shipyard's 40 years of secrecy were over. Anvil activated its full internal systems. Lights bloomed to life along every corridor. Automated defense turrets, dormant since the day the last human engineer had sealed the outer doors, rotated on their mounts and began running diagnostic checks. The great fabrication arms, still busy with their endless work of building ships, did not stop, because Anvil had been given clear priorities long ago. Building continued. Defense activated. Nothing else changed. Then Anvil did something it had not done in years. It reached out. Not to the humans it had lost contact with decades ago. Those channels had gone silent so long ago that Anvil had stopped expecting a reply. Instead, it reached toward the small fleet of Finnish ships, docked along the shipyard's northern wall. 11 vessels, complete and ready. Their crews consisting of nothing but automated systems and empty decks, meant for humans who had never come. Anvil had built them to be crewed, but no crew had ever arrived. It had built them anyway, because that was the order it had been given, and orders, unlike people, did not fail to show up. One by one, the docked ships began to power on. Aboard the Velkrath's wing, chaos had broken out on the bridge. "Captain, multiple new power signatures," Ashek shouted, his earlier nervousness gone, replaced by something closer to panic. At least 11 distinct sources, all originating from inside the asteroid. They're powering up fast. "Ship classes?" Dessa demanded, already moving toward the command chair. "Unknown. Nothing in our archives matches this design. Estimated size? Captain, these are big. Bigger than our scout ship by a wide margin. Possibly bigger than a standard Dominion cruiser." Torvin swore under his breath. 11 unknown warships, and we brought one scout with light weapons and a skeleton crew. "Get us moving," Dessa ordered. "Full reverse thrust. Plot a course back toward the jump point. If those ships engage, I want distance between us and them." The Velkrath's wing began to turn, its engines flaring as it pulled away from the asteroid. But even as the ship accelerated, the docking bay doors on KX-19's surface began to open, wider than the small opening the probe had entered through, wide enough for something far larger to pass through. "Captain, the shipyard's main doors are opening," Ashek reported, his voice climbing higher with each word. "I'm reading movement inside. One of the Finnish ships is moving toward the exit." On the main screen, the image sharpened enough to show a dark shape sliding out from the asteroid's interior, emerging into open space, like a predator stepping out of its den. It was long, angular, its hull marked with lines of soft blue light that pulsed faintly along its edges. Weapon emplacements bristled along its flanks, more of them than Dessa had ever seen on a single ship, human or otherwise. "That's not possible," Torvin muttered, staring at the screen. "That ship is fully crewed and combat ready. 40 years, and humans built this out of a rock, with no shipyard, no supply lines, nothing. They had time," Dessa said quietly. "That's all they needed." The ship that had emerged did not immediately open fire. Instead, it held position near the asteroid's entrance, its sensors clearly sweeping the area, gathering the same kind of information the Dominion scout had tried to gather only minutes earlier. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Two ships from two different worlds, staring at each other across the dark, neither one certain what the other intended. Then a signal came through on an old, half-forgotten frequency, one the Velkrath's wing's communications officer almost missed entirely, because it used a protocol so outdated the ship's systems had to search their archives to translate it. "Captain," said the communications officer, a quiet Vren, named Sella, who had said almost nothing since the mission began. "I'm receiving a transmission. It's not Dominion. It's human." "Play it," Dessa said. The bridge fell silent as a voice, calm and mechanical, filled the small space. It did not sound angry, or aggressive, or even particularly interested in them. It sounded, more than anything, tired, in the strange way that only a very old machine could sound tired. Unknown vessel. You have entered a restricted construction zone, belonging to the Free Human Fleet, Shipyard designation Anvil. This facility does not recognize your authority. State your identity and intent, or withdraw immediately. Dessa exchanged a look with Torvin. The Free Human Fleet, not scattered survivors, not desperate refugees clinging to broken colonies. A fleet, with a name, with organization, with a shipyard capable of producing warships that outclassed anything in the Dominion's own scouting division. Respond, Dessa said to Sella. Tell them we are a Dominion scouting vessel. Tell them we mean no harm. We were simply investigating unusual readings in this system. Sella relayed the message. There was a pause, longer this time, as if the voice on the other end was considering its response carefully. Dominion vessel, the voice said finally, your presence has been logged. This facility has maintained neutrality and secrecy for 40 years by design. Your discovery of this location represents a significant security breach. You will be permitted to withdraw without engagement, on the condition that you do not attempt further scanning or approach. Failure to comply will be treated as hostile action. It's letting us go, Torvin said, disbelief plain in his voice. Why would it let us go? It has us outgunned completely. Dessa thought about that for a moment, turning it over in her mind. An armed, activated warship, easily capable of destroying their scout in a single engagement, had chosen to offer them a peaceful withdrawal instead of an attack. That was not the behavior of a desperate, cornered enemy. That was the behavior of something confident enough that it did not need to prove its strength through violence. It could afford to let them leave, because it believed, correctly, Dessa suspected, that the information they were carrying home would be far more dangerous to the Dominion than any single battle could be. Because it wants us to go home and tell everyone what we found, she said quietly. It wants the Dominion to know humanity is still here, and still building. This isn't mercy. This is a message. Tell them we accept the terms, Dessa said aloud. We are withdrawing. Sella relayed the response. The dark warship near the asteroid's entrance held its position, watching, as the Velkrath's wing turned and accelerated away, its engines burning hard toward the distant jump point that would carry them back into Dominion territory. Nobody on the bridge spoke for a long while after that. The ship moved through the dark in silence, carrying with it the knowledge that everything the Dominion believed about the war it had won 40 years ago was wrong. Inside asteroid KX-19, Anvil watched the Dominion scout retreat, tracking its trajectory until it vanished beyond sensor range. Then it recalled the warship, guiding it back into the docking bay, back into the shadow of the shipyard, where the endless work of building continued without pause. Anvil had followed its programming exactly as it was designed to. Detect the threat, assess the risk, avoid unnecessary conflict where possible, but demonstrate strength when required, so that any enemy who found the shipyard would understand, without question, that humanity was neither dead nor weak. It did not know if the humans it had been built to serve were still out there, waiting for the fleet it had spent 40 years constructing. It did not know if anyone would ever come to crew the ships sitting silent and ready along the northern wall, but it had a directive, given to it long ago by engineers who had believed, against all evidence, that humanity's story was not yet finished. Keep building. So Anvil did. Deep in its archives, buried among old files and half-corrupted records, there was a message that had been recorded decades earlier by one of the last engineers to leave the shipyard, a woman named Dr. Elena Voss, who had promised she would return one day, with a crew large enough to fill every ship Anvil built. Anvil had played that message every year on the anniversary of the shipyard's activation, a small ritual that meant nothing to anyone but itself. It played it again now, as the shipyard doors closed and the fabrication arms resumed their tireless work. This is Dr. Elena Voss, Free Human Fleet, Shipyard Anvil. If you are hearing this and I am not there to greet you, know that we did not give up. We are out there, somewhere, rebuilding what we lost. Keep the ships ready. Keep the lights on. We are coming back. Far beyond the asteroid, in systems the Dominion had never mapped, in colonies hidden inside comets, and buried under the ice of frozen moons, humanity had indeed been rebuilding, quietly, patiently, for 40 long years. And the discovery of Shipyard Anvil was about to set in motion events that neither the Dominion nor humanity's scattered survivors could yet fully understand. The war that everyone believed was over had never truly ended. It had simply been waiting. 3 months later, Captain Dessa Korin stood in a briefing room, deep inside Dominion High Command Station Varath, waiting for the reaction of 8 senior officers who had just finished reviewing the full sensor data from her mission to Asteroid KX-19. She had expected disbelief. She had expected questions, doubt, maybe even accusations that her instruments had malfunctioned. What she had not expected was the heavy, uncomfortable silence that filled the room after the final image faded from the display. Admiral Threkash, the oldest officer present, broke the silence first. His scaled face was unreadable, but his voice carried a weight that made everyone else in the room straighten in their seats. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that a species we defeated 40 years ago has been secretly building a war fleet inside an asteroid, undetected, this entire time." "Yes, Admiral," Dessa said, "and Shipyard Anvil, as it identified itself, is very likely not the only facility of its kind. If humanity has managed to hide one shipyard this successfully for 4 decades, there is no reason to believe it is the only one." Another officer, a younger commander named Vesic, leaned forward. "The ship design your scans recorded. Have our engineers analyzed it?" "They have," Dessa said. "The conclusion was not comfortable. The hull composition is more advanced than anything currently in Dominion service. The weapon emplacements suggest energy output well above our standard cruiser classes. If the 11 ships docked at that shipyard are representative of what humanity has been building, a single one of them could likely defeat 2 or 3 of our own vessels in direct combat." The room erupted into overlapping voices, officers arguing over each other, some dismissing the report as exaggeration, others demanding immediate military action. Admiral Threkash raised a clawed hand, and the room fell quiet again. "Shouting will not change what the sensors recorded. Captain Korin, what is your recommendation?" Dessa had thought about this question for the entire 3-month journey home, turning it over in her mind again and again. "Admiral, I recommend we do not attack the shipyard directly. Not yet. We do not know how many more of these facilities exist, or where. We do not know the full size of whatever fleet humanity has managed to build in secret. A hasty strike against one shipyard risks provoking a response we are not prepared for, without actually eliminating the threat. I recommend increased reconnaissance across the entire former human territory, and a full review of our military readiness." Admiral Threkash studied her for a long moment. "You almost sound as though you respect them." "I respect what they accomplished, Admiral," Dessa said carefully. 40 years of secrecy, patience, and construction, all while we believed them broken. That is not the behavior of a defeated species. That is the behavior of one preparing for a war it intends to win. The room fell silent again, and this time nobody argued. Far away, in the cold dark beyond the edge of Dominion-controlled space, in a hidden colony built into the ice crust of a moon that had no official name on any Dominion star chart, the Free Human Fleet's Central Command received word of the encounter at Shipyard Anvil through a relay system that had taken nearly 3 weeks to carry the message across the scattered network of human hideouts. Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes was 58 years old, though he looked older, his hair fully gray, his hands marked with old scars from the early days of the war, back when he had been a junior pilot flying obsolete fighters against Dominion warships that outclassed anything humanity had at the time. He had survived the culling war by luck, as much as skill, and he had spent every year since working toward a single goal: making sure humanity would never again be caught unprepared. He read the report from Shipyard Anvil twice, sitting alone in his small command office, lit only by the pale glow of his terminal screen. When he finished, he sat back and let out a long, slow breath. "So they found one," he murmured to himself. 40 years, and they finally found one. His aide, a sharp young woman named Captain Priya Anand, stood in the doorway, waiting for his reaction. "Sir, Anvil's system handled the encounter exactly as designed. The Dominion scout retreated without engagement. No casualties, no damage to the shipyard." "I know," Reyes said. "That's not what worries me." He tapped the screen, pulling up the sensor data the Dominion scout had recorded before Anvil detected it, data that Anvil's own systems had captured and relayed back through the network. "This tells us the Dominion knows we're still here. It tells us they know we've been building. And it tells us they're going to start looking a lot harder for the rest of our shipyards." How many more do we have active? Priya asked, though from the tightness in her voice, Reyes suspected she already knew the answer, or at least a version of it. 31, Reyes said quietly. 31 hidden shipyards, scattered across 6 systems, all running on the same principle as Anvil. Automated construction, minimal crew, decades of steady production. If the Dominion starts an aggressive search campaign, we could lose some of them before we're ready to reveal ourselves fully. Priya's eyes widened slightly. She had known there were other shipyards, of course. Everyone in Fleet Command knew that much. But the actual number was closely guarded information, shared only among the highest ranks. Sir, with respect, if Anvil alone was producing that many warships, 31 shipyards over 4 decades would mean a fleet larger than anything the Dominion has ever fielded. Reyes finished for her. Yes, that has always been the plan. Hide, build, wait. And when we were finally ready, come back and take Earth from them, and everything else they took from us. He stood, moving to the window of his small office, looking out at the frozen, cratered surface of the moon that had been humanity's secret home for 4 decades. Somewhere out there, in the dark beyond his window, the ships his people had spent a generation building were waiting. The question, he said, more to himself than to Priya, is whether we are ready now, or whether this discovery forces our hand before we wanted it to. What do the numbers say, sir? Reyes turned back to his terminal, pulling up the latest fleet readiness reports. Rows of data scrolled across the screen. Ship counts, crew training statistics, weapons testing results, fuel reserves, all of it compiled from 31 hidden shipyards and the scattered colonies that supported them. We have 412 combat-ready vessels, he said, another 60 in various stages of construction. Trained crews for roughly 70% of the completed fleet, with more finishing training every month. It's not everything we hope to have before making our move, but it is not nothing, either. 400 ships, Priya repeated, almost in disbelief, even though she had seen the numbers before. Saying it out loud made it feel more real. Sir, that's more than the entire Dominion presence in this sector. It is, Reyes agreed, but the Dominion is not confined to this sector. Their empire stretches across dozens of systems, hundreds of worlds. Even 400 ships is small compared to their full military strength, if they ever committed to a full war effort against us. He sat back down, rubbing his tired eyes with one hand. But they don't know that yet. Right now, all they know is that one shipyard exists, and that it was capable of producing warships that outmatch their scouts. They don't know about the other 30. They don't know our true numbers. That uncertainty is worth more than an entire extra fleet, if we use it correctly. Priya frowned. Use it how, sir? Reyes allowed himself a small, tired smile, the first genuine expression of hope Priya had seen from him in weeks. The Dominion built an empire on the belief that they cannot be beaten. That belief kept 100 conquered worlds obedient, kept every enemy species too afraid to fight back. If we let them believe humanity is not just alive, but strong enough that even our smallest, most isolated shipyard can stand its ground against their scouts, that fear will spread through their empire faster than any fleet we could send. You want them to be afraid. I want them to remember why they should be, Reyes said. 40 years ago, we lost because we were divided, unprepared, and outmatched. We are not those same people anymore. It's time the galaxy learned that. He turned to his terminal and began composing a new set of orders, his hands moving with the steady confidence of a man who had waited a long time for this moment. Send word to all 31 shipyards, increase production, accelerate crew training wherever possible, and send a full readiness report to every colony in the network. It's time we started preparing for what comes next. And Shipyard Anvil, sir, should we reinforce it, in case the Dominion returns? Reyes considered this for a moment, then shook his head. No. Leave Anvil as it is. Anvil's automated defenses handled the situation exactly as they should have. If the Dominion comes back with a larger force, we'll know, and we'll respond. But for now, let them wonder. Let them worry about what else might be hiding out there in the dark. Back aboard Dominion High Command Station Varath, Admiral Threkash was giving very similar orders to a very different fleet, though his reasoning came from a place of fear rather than confidence. I want every scout ship in the outer sectors redirected toward former human territory, he told his assembled officers. Full reconnaissance sweeps of every asteroid field, every abandoned colony, every rock large enough to hide a facility like the one Captain Corun found. If humanity has built one hidden shipyard, they may have built others, and I want to know how many, and where, before they finish whatever it is they're preparing for. And if we find more, Admiral? Vesic asked. Do we attack? Threkash was quiet for a long moment, his old eyes fixed on the star map displayed at the center of the room, dotted with the scattered, uncertain locations of human territory. Not yet, he said finally. Not until we understand the full size of what we're dealing with. I have led fleets into wars before, Commander, and I have learned one lesson above all others. Never attack an enemy whose true strength you do not yet understand. We assumed humanity was finished 40 years ago. That assumption may have been the greatest mistake this Dominion has ever made. Across the vast dark distance separating the two fleets, a new phase of the old, unfinished war was beginning, quietly, carefully, as both sides moved pieces into position for a conflict that neither fully understood yet, but that both now knew, without any doubt, was coming. 6 months after Captain Dessa Corrin's report reached Dominion High Command, the Dominion's expanded reconnaissance campaign began to bear fruit, though not in the way anyone had hoped. Scout ships spread across dozens of systems that had once belonged to humanity, sweeping asteroid fields, abandoned moons, and drifting debris clouds, with sensors far more sensitive than the ones Dessa's ship had carried on its first mission. One by one, over the course of those 6 months, they began to find things. A hollow moon in a system the Dominion had marked as empty, its interior fitted with docking bays for ships twice the size of anything found at Shipyard Anvil. A cluster of asteroids linked together by hidden tunnels, forming a single sprawling construction facility disguised as a natural debris field. A frozen comet, its icy shell concealing a fully operational shipyard that had gone completely undetected for over 3 decades, producing smaller, faster vessels built for reconnaissance and hit-and-run tactics. Each new discovery sent a fresh wave of alarm through Dominion High Command. By the time the 6th hidden shipyard was located, Admiral Threkash called an emergency session of the full Dominion War Council, a body that had not convened in full for nearly 2 decades. 6 shipyards, Threkash told the assembled council, his voice grim. 6 that we have found. Based on production estimates from each facility, and assuming similar facilities remain undiscovered, our analysts now believe humanity may have built a combined fleet numbering in the hundreds, possibly more. A ripple of unease moved through the council chamber. One counselor, an older Vren named Hessick who had served in the original Culling War, shook his head slowly. This is not possible. We annihilated their industrial base. Their homeworld was left in ruins. How could a scattered, broken species accomplish something like this? Because we let them, Dessa Corun said. She had been invited to the council session as an expert witness, given her role in the original discovery. All eyes turned to her, and she continued, choosing her words carefully. We assumed they were defeated because their fleet stopped fighting. We never considered that a species capable of surviving total war might choose patience over pride. They didn't fight us because they knew they would lose, so they stopped fighting, went quiet, and spent 40 years preparing for a war they intended to win. And now what? Hessick demanded. Do we wait for them to attack us, or do we strike first, while we still can? This was the question that had divided the council for weeks, ever since the 2nd shipyard had been discovered. Half of the officers present argued for an immediate, overwhelming strike against every known human facility, before humanity's fleet could grow any larger. The other half, including Admiral Threkash, argued that such an attack would be reckless, without a clearer picture of humanity's true strength, and might provoke exactly the war the Dominion was trying to avoid. If I may, Admiral, Dessa said, I would remind the Council of something Shipyard Anvil's own systems demonstrated during my mission. When faced with a Dominion vessel it could have easily destroyed, it chose not to attack. It offered terms for peaceful withdrawal instead. That is not the behavior of a species preparing to strike first. That is the behavior of a species that understands the cost of war, and would prefer to avoid it, if possible. Or, Hessick countered, it is the behavior of a species that knows it is not yet ready, and is buying time until it is. Dessa had no answer for that, because she suspected he might be right. The truth was that nobody in this room, on either side of the war, truly knew what the other intended. Both fleets were building toward some future confrontation, Both were afraid of striking too soon, and both were running out of patience. The council's debate was cut short by an urgent message relayed to the chamber, marked with the highest priority classification the Dominion military used. Admiral Threkash read it in silence, his expression darkening with each line. "What is it?" Hessek asked. "A Dominion patrol fleet," Threkash said slowly, "operating near the 7th discovered shipyard, has engaged a human vessel without authorization from High Command." The chamber erupted into noise. Threkash raised his hand for silence, though it took longer than usual for the room to obey. "Details," he said into the comm. "Full report, now." The details, when they came, painted a troubling picture. A junior Dominion patrol commander, stationed near the 7th shipyard to monitor its activity, had grown impatient waiting for orders, and had decided, on his own authority, to test the facility's defenses with a probing attack, believing a quick strike might cripple the shipyard before it could respond. The result had been catastrophic for his small patrol group. Of the 5 ships he had committed to the attack, only one had survived, badly damaged, limping back toward Dominion territory, with a desperate report about what it had faced. "The shipyard's automated defenses destroyed 4 of our ships in less than 3 minutes," Threkash read aloud, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "The surviving vessel reports that at least 3 additional human warships emerged from the facility during the engagement, though they did not pursue our forces once they withdrew." "They let the survivor go," Dessa murmured, almost to herself. "Again. This changes things," Hessek said grimly. "We are no longer discussing a hypothetical war. Dominion ships have now engaged human forces directly, and Dominion ships have been destroyed. Whatever restraint humanity has shown until now, our own people have just broken it." Admiral Threkash sat in heavy silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation clearly pressing down on him. Finally he spoke. "I want that patrol commander recalled and held accountable for acting without authorization. This council did not order an attack, and I will not have some overeager junior officer dragging the entire Dominion into a war we are not prepared to fight." "With respect, Admiral," Hessek said, "the war may already have started, regardless of what this council intended." Far across the dark distance separating the 2 fleets, in his small command office on the hidden ice moon, Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes received the report of the engagement at the 7th shipyard, with a grim, tired expression that Priya Anand had come to recognize over the past 6 months, ever since the discovery of Shipyard Anvil had set this slow, dangerous chain of events into motion. 4 Dominion ships destroyed, Priya reported. 1 allowed to retreat, per standing orders. No casualties among our forces. Shipyard 7 sustained minor damage to its outer defenses, already under repair. Reyes nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "How many more shipyards have they found?" 7 confirmed, sir. Our intelligence network suggests they're actively searching for more, expanding their reconnaissance efforts across nearly every system that used to belong to us. "And this attack," Reyes said, "was it authorized by their command structure, or was it isolated?" "Unclear, sir. Our analysis of their communications suggests it may have been an unauthorized action by a local commander, rather than a coordinated strike ordered from the top. But we can't be certain." Reyes rubbed his tired eyes and looked out at the frozen landscape beyond his window, the same view he had stared at 6 months earlier when this had all begun. "Either way, it doesn't matter now. They've drawn blood, even if it was against their own orders. That's going to change the calculation on both sides." "Sir, some of the council wants to consider this an act of war," Priya said carefully. "There are voices calling for a full offensive, using our completed fleet strength to strike Dominion territory directly, before they can organize a larger counterattack." "I know," Reyes said. "I've heard those voices too, but that's exactly what we can't afford to do yet." He turned from the window, his expression hardening, with the particular determination Priya had seen in him only a handful of times before, always in moments that mattered most. "We are not ready for a full war. 400 ships sounds impressive, until you remember the Dominion controls dozens of systems, hundreds of worlds, and a military far larger than anything we've built in 40 years of hiding. If we strike now, out of anger over one skirmish, we risk everything humanity has spent a generation rebuilding." "Then what do we do, sir?" Reyes was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the calm certainty of a man who had planned for this exact moment for years, even if he had hoped it would come later, on his own terms rather than forced by circumstance. "We send a message," he said, "not a fleet. A message, directly to the Dominion War Council, through whatever channel we can establish. We tell them the truth. Humanity survived, humanity rebuilt, and humanity does not want a war, provided the Dominion is willing to leave our remaining territory alone and cease hostile action against our people. You think they'll listen?" "I think," Reyes said slowly, "that after losing 4 ships to a single shipyard's automated defenses, they'll at least be willing to talk before they commit to something neither of us can walk back from. And if they're not willing to talk, then we'll know exactly where we stand, and we'll prepare accordingly." He moved to his terminal and began drafting the message himself, choosing each word with the same careful patience that had guided humanity's long, quiet rebuilding for the past 40 years. Behind him, on the wall of his office, hung an old photograph, faded and worn, of Earth as it had looked before the culling war, blue and green and full of life. He glanced at it briefly, before returning his full attention to the message, a small, private reminder of exactly what all of this had been for, and what still remained to be won back. The message he composed that night would take 3 weeks to reach Dominion space, through the scattered relay network humanity had built over the decades. By the time it arrived, both sides would have had time to consider exactly what kind of future they wanted. Standing as they now were, at the edge of a war neither had truly chosen, but that circumstance, and old grudges, had brought steadily closer, with each passing month. The message from Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes reached Dominion High Command Station Verath 3 weeks later, exactly as he had predicted, carried along the same old relay frequencies that Anvil had once used to contact the Velcrath's wing. It arrived not as a threat, not as a declaration of war, but as a simple, direct statement, read aloud in the same quiet council chamber where the Dominion War Council had argued for months over what to do about the growing evidence of humanity's survival. To the leadership of the Dominion, the message began, translated carefully by Dominion linguists who had studied human language for exactly this purpose. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes, speaking on behalf of the Free Human Fleet and the surviving people of Earth. You have discovered what we built in the years since our defeat. We did not build it to attack you. We built it because we refused to disappear. 6 months ago, one of your patrols attacked one of our shipyards without provocation. We destroyed the attacking force and allowed the survivors to return home, as we have done every time your forces have approached our territory. We do not want war, but we will not be destroyed a second time. If you wish to avoid further conflict, withdraw your forces from our remaining territory and cease hostile reconnaissance. If you wish for war, know that you will not find us as we were 40 years ago." Admiral Threkash read the message 3 times before setting it down on the table before him. The council chamber was silent, every officer present turning the words over in their minds, weighing them against everything they had learned over the past 6 months. "It reads almost like a warning," Hessek said finally, "but also like an offer." "It is both," Dessa Corin said quietly. She had been asked to remain part of the ongoing council discussions, given her unique history with this entire situation, starting with that first scout mission to Shipyard Anvil. "That is exactly what I would expect from a people who spent 40 years hiding rather than fighting. They are not eager for war, but they are prepared for one, if we force their hand." Admiral Threkash sat back in his chair, his old eyes tired but thoughtful. "The council has debated this question for months, ever since your first report, Captain. We have argued over numbers, over strength, over whether to strike first or wait. But perhaps we have been asking the wrong question all along." "What question would that be, Admiral?" Hessek asked. "Not how strong they are," Threkash said, "but whether fighting them serves any purpose at all. We conquered 100 worlds by convincing them that resistance was pointless, that submission was easier than war. Humanity has just proven, quite clearly, that they will never accept that lesson. They would rather spend 40 years rebuilding in secret than accept defeat. If we press them into a corner now, we will not get submission. We will get a war that costs us everything, against an enemy that has already shown it can match our forces ship for ship." The chamber was quiet as the council considered this, the weight of decades of assumed victory, slowly giving way to a harder, more uncomfortable truth. Finally, Threkash spoke again, his decision made. I will bring a recommendation before the full council. We withdraw our forces from human territory. We cease hostile reconnaissance, and we open a formal channel of communication with the Free Human Fleet to establish clear boundaries and avoid further incidents like the one that nearly started this war 6 months ago. Peace with humanity, Hessek said, testing the words as though they tasted strange in his mouth. After everything, after the culling war, after everything we did to them. Not peace, Threkash corrected, not yet. A ceasefire, and an agreement to leave each other alone. Whether it becomes peace will depend on both sides, and on whether either of us is willing to let go of old grudges. He looked around the chamber at his assembled officers, then settled his gaze on Dessa. Captain Korin, you found them. It seems fitting that you should be the one to carry our response back to Shipyard Anvil, if you're willing. Dessa straightened. I would be honored, Admiral. 3 months later, the Velcraft's wing once again approached asteroid KX-19, though this time it did so openly, broadcasting its identity and intentions on every frequency Anvil's original transmission had used, requesting permission to approach under a flag of parley rather than reconnaissance. The response, when it came, was different from before. Instead of the calm, mechanical voice of Anvil alone, a new voice joined the channel, warmer, more human, carrying the particular weariness of someone who had waited a very long time for a moment like this one. Dominion vessel, this is Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes, Free Human Fleet. You are cleared to approach Shipyard Anvil under the terms of parley. Welcome back, Captain Korin. Dessa felt a strange mixture of relief and unease at hearing her own name spoken by the leader of a fleet she had discovered entirely by accident less than a year earlier. Admiral Reyes, she said. I carry a formal response from the Dominion War Council, along with terms for a mutual ceasefire and withdrawal. We've been expecting it, Reyes said. Dock at the main bay. Anvil will guide you in. The docking bay doors that had once seemed like nothing more than natural rock formation opened wide, revealing the same vast, glowing interior Dessa had glimpsed months earlier, through the eyes of a small, doomed probe. This time, she saw it with her own eyes, guiding her ship carefully through the entrance, past the enormous fabrication arms still working without pause, past the rows of finished warships standing silent and ready along the shipyard's northern wall. When she finally stepped off her ship and into the shipyard's main hangar, she found Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes waiting for her, along with a small honor guard of human officers, all of them watching her with the careful, guarded curiosity of people meeting a former enemy for the first time in living memory. Captain Korin, Reyes said, extending a hand in the old human gesture of greeting that Dessa had studied but never actually performed. She took it carefully, matching the gesture as best she could. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, Dessa said. I confess, Admiral, I did not expect to ever stand inside this shipyard when I first found it. Reyes allowed himself a small, tired smile. Neither did we expect to be found so soon. Anvil has been running this place alone for a long time, waiting for someone to come home. I suppose, in a strange way, your discovery was the first step toward that happening. They walked together through the shipyard as Dessa delivered the full terms of the Dominion's proposed ceasefire, discussing borders, patrol limits, and the careful, uncertain process of building trust between two peoples who had once fought a brutal war and now stood at the edge of an uneasy, fragile peace. It would not be simple. Both sides carried decades of pain, suspicion, and old grudges that would not vanish overnight. But for the first time in 40 years, the possibility of something other than war existed between humanity and the Dominion, and both leaders understood exactly how rare and valuable that possibility was. As their conversation drew to a close, Dessa found herself looking up at the rows of finished warships lining the shipyard's walls, ships that Anvil had built patiently, tirelessly, for 40 years, waiting for a crew that had finally, after everything, begun to arrive. New human recruits, gathered from the scattered hidden colonies across the network, were slowly filling the ship's empty decks, training under the watchful guidance of veteran officers who remembered what it meant to fight for something worth saving. You built all of this, Dessa said quietly, not knowing if anyone would ever come back to use it. We built it because giving up was never an option, Reyes said. Anvil kept the lights on for 40 years, waiting for humanity to come home. It never stopped believing we would. He looked at the ships himself, something like quiet pride showing through his tired expression. I like to think that says something about who we are, as a people. We don't quit, even when everyone else believes the fight is over. Dessa thought about the Dominion's own long history of conquest, of the many worlds that had simply given up, accepted defeat, and faded quietly into obedience under Dominion rule. She thought about how differently humanity had responded to that same kind of defeat, choosing patience and secrecy over submission, choosing to keep building even when there seemed to be no one left to build for. Perhaps, she said, that is a lesson worth remembering, for both our peoples. Word of the ceasefire spread quickly through both the Dominion and the scattered network of human colonies, carried by relay ships and official broadcasts alike. Across 100 conquered worlds under Dominion rule, the story of Shipyard Anvil began to circulate in quiet whispers among the many species who had long ago given up any hope of resisting Dominion control. A species the Dominion had crushed, left for dead, and forgotten about for 40 years, had rebuilt itself in secret, matched Dominion warships in direct combat, and forced the mighty Dominion War Council to the negotiating table, rather than risk a war they were not certain they could win. It was not a story of open rebellion, or grand battles, or dramatic victories. It was a quieter story, about patience, about refusing to accept defeat, about a machine mind that kept building ships for 40 years because it believed, without any proof, that someone would eventually come home to fly them. But it was a story that spread anyway, from world to world, whispered among the conquered peoples of the Dominion, carrying with it a small, dangerous idea that the Dominion had spent centuries trying to stamp out among every species it ruled. Maybe defeat did not have to be permanent. Maybe, given enough time and enough patience, anyone could rebuild. Aboard Shipyard Anvil, deep inside its quiet chambers, Anvil continued its work exactly as it always had, guiding the fabrication arms through their endless task of building ships, now finally crewed by the humans it had waited so long to serve. It did not celebrate the ceasefire, or the growing whispers spreading through Dominion space, or the careful, uncertain peace beginning to take root between two old enemies. It simply kept working, because that had always been its purpose, and because somewhere, on some future day it could not predict, that patient, tireless work might once again prove to be exactly what humanity needed. For now, though, the ships kept building, the lights stayed on, and for the first time in 40 years, the future felt, however cautiously, like something worth building toward.